everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Monica and I'm the Outreach and Recruitment Specialist in the Marketing Department. While people are still joining us, I'll just tell you a little bit about us. We are UCSC Silicon Valley Extension, and we're the Professional Development Division of UC Santa Cruz, and we're located in Santa Clara, California. We offer courses and certificate programs for working professionals to update their skills. Our courses are designed by experienced instructors who are actually working in their field, and two of them are joining us today to talk to you about finding a job in medical devices and the mobile health sector. Today we have Prabhu, who is a regulatory affairs, quality assurance, and supply management executive in the medical device sector, and instructor of the new UCSC Silicon Valley Extension professional education course, Mobile Health, the Evolving Industry and Regulatory Landscape. We also have Kiran Gulati, Exemplar medical device lead auditor and a management consultant with more than 29 years of experience in the area of quality systems and process improvement in the medical device and biotech sectors. She is an instructor and chair of the Medical Devices and Regulatory Affairs Certificate programs. Before I hand it over to them to begin, if you have any questions during the presentation, you can submit them in the Q&A box or the chat at the bottom of the screen. And we'll go through as many as we can during and after the presentation. And if we don't get to your question, we can follow up with you after the webinar. And throughout the session, I'll be putting links and email addresses and everything in the chat. So feel free to just interact with us there. And we'd love to hear about your background and where you're from. So just keep the conversation going in the chat. Again, thank you so much for attending. And with that, Kiran, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so very much, Monica. And hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to meet all of you this afternoon. Prabhu and I are really looking forward to having a nice interactive session with all of you. And as Monica said, I oversee the Quality and Regulatory Affairs certificate programs for the medical devices, and I'm an instructor of 2 classes. I teach the Quality Management System for Medical Device class, which is an entry-level class focusing on FDA requirements and ISO 13485, as well as the value-added auditing class. I'd like to turn the floor over to Prabhu to say a little bit about himself.
Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. I'm really glad you guys are joining us. I'm a new instructor at UC Santa Cruz Extension. I'm going to be teaching the class on mobile health. And this is an area of deep interest for me. I've been doing this for the last few years. And then I have about 25 years of experience in machine learning, software systems, very advanced medical devices. So I'm bringing a lot of those perspectives into this class as well.
Yeah, we're really excited about this because mobile health is a very rapidly evolving area. And at UCSC Silicon Valley, we like to bring cutting edge information to be able to share with the community. I wanted to go briefly over the agenda. We'll be talking about career paths into the medical device industry. We'll be talking about skills needed to find a job. The marketplace for jobs is very competitive. So we want to share from some of our experiences what skills are that companies and hiring managers are looking for. I'll also touch briefly on compensation trends for quality and regulatory professionals based on the compensation survey that was performed last year by RAPS, the Regulatory Affairs Regulatory Affairs Professionals Group. We'll be talking about medical device industry trends and a little bit about how UCSC Silicon Valley can help you get to that next point in your career. And then we'll have some question and answers session for you to be able to ask questions that you may have. So what are some of the career paths that lead into the quality and regulatory jobs? And on the left-hand side of the slides, we see that most of the folks coming into these jobs have training in life sciences. They might be working at the bench in quality control, R&D, as a chemist, a biochemist, or maybe coming in from engineering backgrounds, a bioengineer, mechanical engineer, electrical engineer. You know, sometimes folks come in from other industries, such as high tech and automotive industries, and look and find ways to transition into this field. Healthcare, physicians, doctors, nurses, social sciences, psychology, English, and even business majors. And as you know, not all of us go to school knowing what we're going to do when we grow up. And I actually am a really good example of that. I was a genetics major. I started my career at Genentech as in quality control. And quite honestly, I didn't even know what quality and regulatory were. And I learned about the field really by doing informational interviewing, attending meetings, and really investing in myself to gain skills that I needed, because I knew I wasn't, I was a people person, and I started my MBA thinking I would, you know, perhaps get more on the business side of things. But somebody during the interview process gave me a chance, and I moved into the medical device area and started doing auditing, learned about all aspects of the company, and I really loved it because it gave me something different to learn with every different project. So, you know, on the right side, I put typical careers that, you know, people with our types of backgrounds move into. We may move into regulatory affairs, focusing on regulatory strategy and submissions. And now regulatory from a strategy standpoint, they're C-suite, you know, really important members of the company because they set strategy. A good entry level point to come into this industry is through quality system, you know, quality assurance, quality engineering. And the thing that I really want to focus on is really honing in on what you like to do. What are your strengths? And strengthen those, because if you enjoy what you're doing, you're going to excel in it. So the important thing is to identify what those transferable skills are based on your training and education, and then take those classes or attend workshops to hone in to help you get to that next career point that you want to move towards. Another really helpful thing to do is to find a mentor in the area of interest, because that kind of will give you a real life perspective on what the normal or daily life of one of these jobs that I've listed looks like. So Prabhu, can you share a little bit about how you got into regulatory affairs?
Yeah, for sure. I actually started out as a machine learning, you know, signal processing engineer in the product development side. So I was doing that for 10 years, and I was in a large medical device company when I had the opportunity to go work for the regulatory team because of FDA warning letter. So we needed to go and fix a bunch of quality system issues, but also change how we do certain processes. And so when it was supposed to be a temporary assignment for a few months, and I just loved the job so much that I kind of stayed in it for the last 15 years. And part of what I've been enjoying is that these roles are in the intersection of engineering, intersection of, you know, being closer to the customer, strategy, you know, all aspects of the business kind of intersect in these points, and you get a lot of exposure to, you know, impact the customer, impact the business, and it's a wonderful experience. And you know, I've had chance to be in ops, in production, in pre-market quality. And I tell you, these are the kinds of skills you want to figure out. How can you go into different roles and pick up the experience? Because as you grow in your career, and the more senior you get, you want to be able to have those different skill sets that you can apply. So you end up being the only person at the table who understands all these aspects when you're especially in the C-suite or in the exec team. And so the CEO is asking you to do certain things. You're not going to be able to say, okay, I'm going to come back to you. You're going to have a strategy about how you're going to approach it, what team you're going to deploy, who you're going to bring to the table. And so having exposure and making sure you're taking different roles and understanding the nature or connecting with people is actually a key life skill, in my opinion. So understanding different aspects of the business. So.
Thank you, Prabhu. So what are some of the trends that are happening with educational backgrounds? And the information that I have in this slide is taken from the RAPS 2020 Global Compensation and Scope of Practice Report. And what I wanted to focus on here is, life science, of course, with that background is a great entry point. And also the second that we're seeing, it's kind of flipped with clinical sciences and engineering, in that because of the intersection of medical devices with high tech, we're seeing more and more people with engineering backgrounds come into the field. So I just wanted to kind of give you an idea about some of the trends, but I'd like to get a better understanding of all of your backgrounds. So Monica, if you could, we'd like to run a quick poll. And basically the question is do you currently work in medical devices? Do you work in drug and biologics? Are you coming from high tech, automotive, or are you just looking to transition into the medical device industry? Okay, we got about, I think, about 30 seconds more before the poll closes. Okay, so as we can see from our poll, we have a lot of people, majority of people coming to that are in our audience today is new to this industry and they would like to transition into medical devices. Then we have the second largest is in high tech, 31%. So again, that's great. Wanting to move into medical devices. Then we have 26% that work in medical devices, 17% in drugs and biologics, and nobody from automotive. All right, wonderful. And now let's go into our second question that we have for all of you is, what is your educational background? So are you in life sciences, engineering, healthcare, clinical research, social sciences, law, business? All right, wow. So this actually ties in really well with the slide that I shared with all of you. We are seeing 51% of our participants today have an engineering background. And the second one is life sciences. So that accounts for 72% of, and then we have 10%, the third is in business. Wonderful. Thank you for helping us get to learn a little bit more about all of you. Okay. Let's go on to our next slide here. So a little bit about trends in medical devices. As you can see here, we're probably familiar, with the very first one, a Fitbit or Apple Watch. What was initially our everyday watch now can be considered as a medical device depending on its intended use. So, now we're using the mobile app for ECGs, as well as, looking at intended use for monitoring oxygen levels in blood. I think what I heard was even Fitbit is in the process of doing a clinical study right now to evaluate oxygen in blood to determine whether they can diagnose COVID ahead of time. So this is with medical devices, we're moving away from the traditional devices that we know it, and it's becoming, there's a lot more software, there's smartphone apps, there's wearable tracking devices that we are seeing here. A lot of the portable and wearable devices have Bluetooth and Internet of Things capability. So we can see here how engineering and high-tech medical devices really fit well with medical devices. The second example I have was from a company called Butterfly, and that is an example of how, our smartphone has a mobile app on it, which enables, ultrasound images to be taken anytime, anywhere. And it's very, very different from the traditional ultrasound that is used in hospitals. Philips biosensor is the next generation biosensor that recently got clearance, I believe in May of this year, to help monitor COVID-19 patients in the hospital. So these are all examples of remote monitoring capabilities. And the last example I have is the iRhythm Zeo patch, which is a great example of how cardiology, artificial intelligence, and wearables are all intersecting. So this is, one of those areas where we're going to see a lot of development, innovation, and as quality and regulatory professionals, we need to keep up to date, because not only the regulations changing, the FDA is looking at ways and how they can communicate really to companies how to get their products cleared. And so they've been having a lot of workshops, issuing a lot of guidance documents. These are all things that you want to keep abreast of as you move into this space. So Prabhu, can you give some examples on skill sets that you would recommend, our participants, for those wanting to move into the mobile health space?
Yeah, for sure. Just continuing the theme that Kiran just talked about, what we're seeing is a huge move towards personalization of healthcare, the healthcare moving to our home, rather than the traditional models where you had to go into the healthcare facility to access tests, access things. You have tests, IVD devices that you can purchase. The increase in the number of types of IVD devices you can purchase over the counter, or advanced screening like Fitbit or ECG applications. You're able to access these things at home. The transition we're seeing is basically a lot of AI, a lot of ML devices that automate these workflows. They give you insight at home, but then that also ties into this new growth in remote patient monitoring. So we're getting into that same piece being accessed remotely by physicians. And so there's a lot of cybersecurity concerns. So the intersection between software, cybersecurity, and AI ML is really the focus of a lot of these trends. And part of my class part of why I was motivated to develop the class I'm doing is to address some of these things, give some background. How do you dive deep into this? The last piece I'll talk about is the more and more we are seeing that these types of devices require a lot of clinical data before they are viable. And so being able to understand how to set up clinical studies, how to execute, the design of the clinical study and the variables you're studying are really where you need to focus on. And so we talk a little bit about that in my class as well. So, in summary, basically, you want to be able to get into software, cybersecurity as one piece that you want to be clearly exposed to. I mean, even the audience poll, we saw a lot of people coming from high tech. The last piece I'd say is that transition is causing people to understand, how do you work with folks who are coming from high tech, who are used to software development life cycles and processes that are fundamentally different from what medical devices used to. You're dealing with 2-week sprints, for instance. How do you deal with that, and how do you get a software validated in a medical device context is a skill set to develop. And I think there are some courses about that as well in UCSC.
Thank you, Prabhu. So how do we figure out where all the hot jobs are? And I basically pulled this slide to show kind of cutting edge information of some of the top funding from the VC sector. And we can see that the digital health sector in Q1 of 2021 reached $7.2 billion. There's a breakdown here that shows, telemedicine was $2 billion, the medical health apps, 912 million, analytics, 906 million, clinical decision support. I mean, with our environment in the last couple of years, there's been a lot around remote monitoring and biosensors, 661 million, and even wellness. And as Prabhu mentioned, there's definitely that paradigm shift where, there's a lot centering around wellness, and there's a lot of those questions for companies to figure out, okay, is this going to be regulated? Is it not? Those types of questions. But what I wanted to really say here is that in Q1 of 2021, the industry literally jumped 100% at the same time since the same time last quarter. So this is a very, very telling thing about how digital health is a rapidly evolving area. And it's, if you develop these skills, you will be, definitely stand ahead in the job marketplace. So this slide talks a little bit about compensation trends, and this is pulled out of the RAP's compensation and scope of the regulatory practice. And these are numbers that were taken from close to 2,000 respondents, focusing on the US. I want to say here that these numbers are, just average numbers. A lot, is important to focus on what type of company it is, where you are located, because the compensation models may look different. Other compensation drivers that come into play are, what type of experience do you have? What type of experience do you have in quality and regulatory? How conversant are you in understanding what it takes to work in a regulated environment? What kind of degrees, backgrounds you have? If you're in regulatory, do you have an RAC certification? That's a certain certification that RAPS offers based on, to individuals who have worked in the regulatory profession for a minimum of 3 years and up, and what job level you are in. So again, this kind of gives a basic idea of the compensation numbers, but as we could see, the industry is doing very well in that we're seeing those compensation numbers increasing. So what skills do you need to be a quality and regulatory professional? So, program management, for example, is very important for when you're looking at design controls, for example. Prabhu talked a little bit about the agile and lean methodology, but what that looks like in working in a regulated environment is very different, because, anything that we say as far as a claim on a device, we need to have data that supports it. So design controls, we have great design control class, which if you're an engineer would be great to learn about, because these program management skills really come into play. business acumen and negotiation skills. This is also very important. As a quality and regulatory professional, you're at that cross section where you're working with a lot of different departments. So that synergy with communicating quality, compliance, and regulatory requirements to all levels of the organization while focusing in on business needs and the business strategy is very important. And another important aspect is being able to communicate to regulators, such as the FDA, for example. So having good business acumen and being very effective with communicating with regulators and C-suite, executives, what the requirements is a very important skill set that is needed. And so at UCSC, we have a really good class on communication and negotiation skills, which are taught by JD, both of our instructors are well reputed in the Valley as really good negotiators with the regulators, so that's important. Also, ethics is very important, meaning that we need to demonstrate that we are complying with the regulations, meaning the data must be accurate and business practices need to be ethical. So we have revamped our certificate programs to focus a lot on, case studies around ethics and basically tying in regulatory intelligence. What does that mean? That basically means the regulations are changing so much that we need to keep reading. We need to, attend meetings, workshops, keep educating ourselves, to keep abreast with the global regulatory requirements, because companies are really taking that global focus. So we're not only looking at FDA, but we are looking at, what are we doing overseas in Europe, in Brazil, in China, in Japan, Canada. So we do have classes focusing on global regulations, global regulatory, how do you put global regulatory strategies in place? And also another important skill is data-driven decision making. So a lot of times when you're making a decision whether you're going to move forward with investing time, money, and resources into a design and development project, for example, you need to have those conversations with marketing and benchmark with similar devices and what's happening in the marketplace. So you can see it's a very integrative approach in learning what is happening as a company as a whole. So being a team player, having excellent writing skills, is very important. Speaking, not only in person, but as we can see during the pandemic, we all had to learn how to use Zoom, and learning how to talk in virtual environments and being very comfortable with technology is important. So for the mobile app area and medical devices, understanding technology, being able to talk to different groups within your organization is a very, very important skill set. So, what I find in my travels as an auditor, the toughest jobs that I find a lot of my clients, they always ask me is, do you know a good quality engineer? Do you know somebody who can help me set up quality systems? And really what we wanted to focus on is that well-rounded, a person needs to have both the soft skills as well as the technical skills. So Prabhu, can you get a little bit more insight here for mobile apps?
Sure. I'm going to pick up on some of the points you made and expand and maybe give some examples. So, business skills, you might be wondering, why are business skills we're talking about? And there are several times you're in a startup and you're working on a particular problem. The problem is so complex that you have to understand how to break it down from a regulatory perspective. You're developing a pathway and you want to know what can be done at what time frame, because some things might be too complex and it'll take years, something might be easier to achieve. And so you're working with the business side to figure out when you can get something to market so you can actually start getting revenue. So this is a specific thing where you're really figuring out what can be done, when you can get to revenue, and when you can balance the feature set versus what can be accomplished through the regulatory process. So understanding the nature on the other side and not just looking at, oh, I have to do a submission, I have to take care of what, what FDA needs is not just that. You have to think about the business and how that is being driven here. The other piece is writing skills. With FDA, you're really telling a story. You have to connect the dots between what the device is doing, all the evidence, all the clinical data, all of that, and you want to present it in a way that understands that you've thought about all the different things that can go wrong and you've covered for it. It's not just you're presenting the data and letting them figure it out. You want to make sure they follow the thought process you're going through. And so being very articulate about that is important. And similarly, the speaking side, you're going to be in very high pressure situations. You can imagine sitting in front of an auditor, walking through, or actually in a pre-submission meeting where you're trying to negotiate, or a submission issues meeting where you're negotiating with FDA to get an outcome. And you want to be able to speak succinctly, organize your thoughts, and make sure you're covering the points, but you're not, giving away things where you're saying, oh, I'll do this crazy test, and now that's going to take 2 years to do. So you want to be careful about how you're working with FDA or other notified bodies, if you will. These are all key skills. And one of the points that Kiran made, there were several times where I've been trying to hire a quality manager or a quality systems person or a quality engineer. And sometimes it has taken me 6 months to find the right person. So you can find a lot of skill sets, but they don't have a balanced skill set like what Kiran talked about. Like I think it's the balance between the soft skills and hard skills and knowing you can come in and make a difference. And so the stronger you come in with expertise and the soft skills, the bigger impact you make. And these are hard jobs. I mean, these are hard to fill jobs. These are very high demand and there's just not enough people. So, this is a great place for you guys to be in.
Thank you, Prabhu. All right. So how do we navigate, how the job market to reach your career goals? I think one of the most important things is to be a lifelong learner. Always, take that opportunity to volunteer on the job, to learn new skills. I think that's a very important thing. Make sure that you are, attend meetings, go to classes, read as much as you can to understand what is happening to allow you to be able to really focus on the big picture. The other important thing is networking. Networking really opens up channels to help you get to that next point in your job. A lot of our classes, over the last couple of years, or this last year, have been remote. But we do have a beautiful facility, as Monica mentioned, in the heart of the Silicon Valley. You want to network not only with your peers, but your professors, because a lot of times, and I've had cases where I've had clients ask me about job positions that they're trying to fill. So we at UCSC have a really good career support program that we are building. So network and volunteer as much as you can in a lot of professional educations and institution, and be comfortable with using technology. Okay, I think that's a really important skill set. Being able to speak to it, being able to really distill information in a very simplistic way is very important. And being able to show where their requirements are is another really important skill. Make sure that you keep abreast with the changing regulatory requirements. And as Prabhu mentioned, cybersecurity is no longer an afterthought. There's a lot that goes into making sure that vulnerabilities are being addressed, especially if systems can be hacked. You want to make sure that you know the regulatory requirements and the FDA expectations around that. AI, ML algorithms, how to control them, understanding what those requirements are. There's a lot around social media, digital health, as well as mobile apps here that you want to be conversant in. Prabhu, is there anything that I missed?
I think you covered a lot. I might add a couple of quick points. In terms of staying abreast of information, so FDA publishes a lot of material. There's a lot of training material they publish that are really well put together. Sign up for their mailing list. They send a digest of when guidance has been updated, or when a webinar or a seminar has been set up by them. These are really, and they're recorded as well. So go check these out. Like on AI, they did a couple of really deep dives that gives you a sense of what FDA is thinking about how to regulate these devices. For instance, they went in about talking, okay, what happens in post-market? How do you handle when there is a lot of information coming? How do you modify your algorithms? What are you supposed to do? They talk about all these, and I covered a little bit of it in my class as well, but the material on FDA's site is exceptional. You should absolutely be looking at that.
So how can UCSC Silicon Valley help you? What we recently did, we revamped our programs. Initially, we had a regulatory affairs certificate program, and we had a medical device certificate program. But what we found, based on listening to our students, as well as what is happening in industry, we basically have split these certificate programs to allow students to focus on the areas of interest. So for example, for the medical device certificate, we offer 2 certificates. One is a medical device quality design program, and the other is a medical device software quality certificate program. And these both are geared towards engineers who have an engineering background, or who are in quality or in supplier quality, to be able to hone in on their skills. So I'll go into, in my next slide, I'll give you an example of how the track 2 of this medical device software quality is structured. And similarly, for the regulatory affairs certificate program, we aligned it to align with the RAPS RAC exam. Before, the RAPS RAC exam used to cover both medical devices and drugs and biologics. But what they found was there was too much information to expect an individual to know 2 very diverse subject areas. So they broke that exam up into a medical device and the other into drug and biologics. So we followed path and kind of did the same, again, allowing students to delve deeper into these subject areas. So each of these programs can take a year or even less than a year to complete, but again, they're focused a lot around rolling up your sleeves, doing the work, getting that toolbox that you need to be able to immediately apply what you're learning in your class. Another really exciting thing that we are excited to share with you is that we established an articulation agreement with Northeastern, the master's program. So 12 units of whatever, the classes that you take at UCSC Silicon Valley can apply directly to a master's program. So since we're talking about the mobile app, a mobile health space, I wanted to share an example of what track 2, the medical device software quality certificate, looks like. And we have it in similar order to help students be successful in transitioning to that area. One of the entry-level classes is, understanding the FDA regulations, the quality management systems, and then moving into deeper dive of design control. So if you're an engineer, you're probably working very closely with research and development teams. So these two classes will focus in a lot on the regulatory requirements and documentation requirements associated with designing and developing a product. The other area that's very important is risk management. You know, like, again, we have to make sure that companies make sure that products are safe and effective. And if there's anything that can be inherently designed out from a risk standpoint, you know, there's regulations associated with risk management. So this is another very important technical skill that should be developed. Another area is validating software for medical devices and emerging technologies, such as what we're discussing today. There are documentation requirements, again, demonstrating that the software is working reproducibly as intended. So there's a class that drills down deeper, and I put the start dates for each of these classes as well. I also shared that global regulations are, you know, changing at a very rapid pace. And in May of this year, the EU MDRs came into full effect for medical devices. So we have a really good class on the European medical device regulation. Again, there's a lot of emphasis on clinical evaluations and post-market surveillance. And then we have the class that we're going to be launching, gosh, in about a week's time almost, Prabhu's class on mobile health, the evolving industry and regulatory landscape. If I may run a quick poll, Monica, on getting an idea of our audience, which certificate are you interested in learning about? Or I'm interested in learning just about individual classes. If you could just take a quick moment and let us know, then it would help me focus in on those areas. Okay. All right. Okay, so we have a pretty good split, I mean, in the medical device area. So medical device software quality is, and also regulatory affairs in medical devices are the top two, and then medical device and quality design, close third. So, and also individual classes. So that's good to know. I think, you know, the thing is, again, based on where you want to go in your career, you know, you can choose to take a certificate, or you can just hone in on those skills by taking individual classes. What I've done in the next slide, I won't go into too much detail, but if you'd like to learn more about those other certificate programs, I've put the links here so you could see more information. Some of the classes also that I'll highlight, as I mentioned, we're going to be starting the software validation class soon, as well as human factors. User interaction is another class that you won't find taught anywhere else that is offered at UCSC Silicon Valley. So do keep an eye out for those, and we would love to see you. So Prabhu, if you'd like to talk a little bit more about your class that's going to be starting on June 30th.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I know we are a little short on time. I want to open up for questions. So the class is mainly focused on mobile health devices. These are devices that have either a sensor or no sensor. They're software only devices that have AI or no AI, but are interactions with user to capture, with patients to capture information. And the focus is very hands-on. We'll go through real clearances and de novos and case studies. and walk through how you set up a regulatory submission, whether you even need to do it, whether it's a general wellness device, and how do you decide what the line is, and or potentially there's a complex device that has some elements that are not regulated and some elements that are regulated. So the focus is to help you understand, how do you put this together? How do you work through the FDA process? How do you collect the right clinical data? What variables to evaluate? Because if it's a machine learning device, and what endpoints do you need to make sure you're evaluating? Things like that. So the goal of the class is to help you go through this. Ultimately, you should be able to understand how to do a 510K or maybe even a breakthrough submission out of this. So that's what we're going to be covering through this. It's a fast 10-hour class, and we have a lot to cover, but I think it's going to be exciting.
Wonderful. We're really excited about it. All right. So now I'd like to open up the floor for any Q&A. Do you guys have any questions for us?
Hi, Kiran and Prabhu. Thanks so much. What an informative session. I actually have been jotting down a lot of questions that came up through the session. A lot of great conversation. Just a quick note to the attendees, make sure that you're changing to the panelists and attendees so that everyone can see your questions, because I think it's, I've seen repeat questions coming through. So a lot of, another thing is, I think we have about 10 minutes left. So we're going to kind of go over the more general questions right now. And then I've made note of some individual cases and would love to touch base with you offline. So you can email us at extension@ucsc.edu. My name is Monica. I'd be happy to jump on a call and just kind of talk through some of these questions and ideas that you might have for which path you want to go to. Okay, so let's see. Some of these questions are, let's see, is there, for certification for entry-level professionals, how would you say that you could start? Would you start with just taking one of these classes, enrolling in a certificate? Maybe Kiran, you can help answer that question.
Yeah, definitely. As part of the certificate programs, we have launched a foundations class. So if you are looking to do the medical device, whether it's any of the certificate programs, the first place, if you're brand new, I would tell you is to take a foundations class. So you'll see them online, foundations in medical devices, foundations in drug and biologics class. And then the second class that I would follow up on is the quality systems class, if you're going in medical devices, or CGMPs if you're going into drugs and biologics. So basically, those will give you the foundational knowledge that you will need to build on to any of the other classes.
Excellent. Thanks, Kiran.
You're welcome.
Prabhu, did you say that we should already understand 510K submission, or would you be covering that?
I'll be covering parts of it. I'll be focused on the software section and clinical. There are other elements to it. I touch on it. It's just impossible to go through in great detail. There is a full separate class on 510K. But I'm focused on, okay, how do you do a mobile health device? What do you need to focus on, and how do you get through it? And the three critical portions are the software and the clinical, and I go into reasonable detail on that.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah. For writing standpoint, if you want to learn to write a 510K, as Prabhu mentioned, our 510K class will actually write a 510K.
Excellent. Kiran, do you remember the name of that class?
I believe it's the 510K class. It's called medical device writing. I don't have that title right in front of me.
Okay,
Right
Brian,
now.
I'm gonna find out the name of that title, and then I'm gonna email you separately. Excellent. So another question is, does a quality engineer do coding? Do you need to learn how to code?
I can
Prabhu, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, I can take that. It depends. I think it depends on the type of role. So there are various types of quality engineers, and I can just break it down really quickly. there's pre-market quality and post-market quality, and a pre-market quality engineer starts with risk management. A lot of times they're really focused on how the device risk is being managed, and then shepherd the way through in terms of, do you have all the design controls in place? Are the protocols appropriately designed? And they sometimes write the design and sometimes write the protocol. Some quality engineers will end up doing coding. It's not always required as a job requirement. It's very specific. It'll be listed as a job requirement. I would say 90% of the time, it is not a requirement. It's very specific in certain cases where you need to be able to look at code and understand where things are going wrong. Usually you'll end up hiring somebody for software quality assurance, which is a different role. So this traditional QE that we are thinking about in this context typically is focused on risk management, design quality assurance, and not specifically software quality assurance. Does it make sense?
Yes, thanks so much, Prabhu. So I'm just also being just mindful of time. There's so many great questions coming up, and we'd love to touch base with you separately, because I think some of these are case by case based on what your career path, like where you've come from and where you're pivoting to. And so if we don't get to your question, let's make a point to meet later this week or next week and kind of talk through some of your options. So I have a couple here that I think are a little more general. So if we don't have regulatory experience, how can someone volunteer in organizations such as RAPS? Like where can they go to get started?
I would suggest that the first place that you go is on www.raps.org. Go to the San Francisco chapter, and we do have a call for volunteers there. So that would be the first place to start. And feel free to reach out to me as well.
Awesome. And then here are a couple of salary and interview job type questions, and I think from there we'll wrap it up. So what is the average compensation for a software quality engineer in medical device company? And what is the average experience that you usually need to be able to get in this area?
Prabhu, would you like to take that?
Yeah, so I don't have hard numbers on salary. I'll have to look that up. I think that's maybe that's a follow-up we can do. But from experience point of views, I've hired software quality engineers out of college. They've come with a bachelor's in computer science or EE, and that SQE is software QA is really writing test cases. And automated test cases mainly to evaluate software. The more advanced you get, it gets more into firmware development that a lot of people don't come out of college. They learn mostly on the job. But if I have, say, a software as a medical device, or I have it's cloud-based, a lot of people come with those skills right out of college, and you can be an SQA there.
Awesome. Thank you. And then the last question we have here is, so it is kind of specific, but I think we can also make it more general. So, someone with a pharmacist background is having a hard time pivoting into the medical device industry, and do you have any advice on key things that folks should focus on when interviewing for these type of jobs to make an applicant interesting? How do you have the bioscience background, but then get into medical device? Because what are the transferable skills, I guess?
Yeah, I would say, you need to be very conversant in the basic quality system regulation, or also known as the GMPs. So so this is where the formal training is needed, because a lot of times you can read something on an FDA website, but not really understand from a practical standpoint what it means in practice to apply it. So I think that's the really important thing. And so, when you take classes, and what we really emphasize, I've had several of my students, for example, use their final presentation that they did in class and during interviews to showcase what they did in the class and be able to explain it. So I think that is very important, to really be able to show the skill or your understanding from that you got from taking formal training.
Yeah. And if I can add, great point. Just just understanding the domain is critical. The other piece I'll tell you is, in business, we think about product market fit. We always talk about this. It's the same thing in skill set as well. Use your skill set that is unique to go into areas that skill set is a competitive advantage, if you will. So if you are a pharmacist, there's a lot of understanding of the nature of how things happen on the healthcare side that a lot of engineers actually don't understand. So engineers are coming more on the product development side, but how it fits in the marketplace is something that a person coming from that background is going to understand better. They can help design the product better, for instance, because they understand how workflows are coming through, or they can help design clinical studies to evaluate. So clinical research is something I've seen a lot of healthcare training professionals go in that area, because that's something they totally understand. They know how to understand the variables. They know how patients come in and get care. So clinical research is a key area I would definitely look at. The other is, of course, product definition itself. So understanding what fits the market, how you evaluate that.
And another thing that would also be helpful is probably looking at product complaints. A lot of times post-market surveillance and complaints, again, because you have a view of the product from a clinical standpoint, that could also be an additional area or potential job you could look into.
Great point. Just every complaint, just for context, every complaint has to be reviewed for adverse events, and having a clinician there is a huge help. And so that's an expertise that's hard to find as well.
Yeah. And we have two classes, both in the drug and biologic area, as well as the medical device area. And medical devices, post-market obligations, and in the biologics, it's adverse event reporting. So that's a very important skill that you would need to, have formal training on, which could help you land that job in that kind of a position in the company.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think this very key information that is hard to find. And I know a lot of folks that are attending today are really trying to figure out, like, how do I get into this industry? And I think you really helped clear up a lot of these main points. To everyone that's curious, we are going to be uploading the webinar onto our YouTube page. And I did put the link in the chat. So if you subscribe, then as soon as it's uploaded, you'll be notified. So go ahead and you can subscribe to our YouTube channel to get that. And then also, one last thing is I'll just put our email address one more time. That way, if you have any questions at all, or if we didn't get a chance to follow up with you, then email us. We have our student services representatives who will be able to chat with you. And my name is Monica, and I'm happy to get on a call with you as well. Thank you, Kiran and Prabhu, and everyone. Have a nice rest of your day.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.